Was one of the big headlines, if not one of the shocking headlines over the weekend. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia passed away this weekend. Here was some analysis and context on what this means from the Oklahoman studio in Washington, D.C., where it is snowing. Chris Castile joins us. Sir, how are you?
I'm doing great, Dave. Thanks.
Well, please stay warm this week. I'd hate to rub it in at 60s and 70 degrees here, and you guys are still dealing with the winter. This has multiple effects, the death of Justice Scalia, from the effects on the presidential race to upcoming decisions in the court to his legacy. Let's start, though, with the effects on the presidential race, and that's kind of twofold. These candidates that are vying for the presidential bid later this year want to be able to submit their nomination next year. Of course, President Obama wants to do it during his term. Your thoughts on that and the importance of that?
I think, in the context of the presidential race, both sides, the Democrat, it's been a partisan split. It's split along the same lines as the incumbent senators, the sitting Senate leaders, Republicans. The Republican leader, Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, has already said we're not going to approve an Obama nomination. The Democrats in the Senate have said this is his constitutional duty. The Senate has a constitutional duty to consider. He's got almost a year left of his presidency. This is absurd to leave this seat open for what will really be more than a year if the Republicans were to block or defeat an Obama nomination, because the next president doesn't take office until January 20th, and you have to do all of the vetting and then debate. So it would easily be February, maybe even into March of 2017. So all the Republican presidential candidates, for the most part, said don't even nominate. You're a lame duck president. We don't want you to make a lifetime appointment to this in a situation, especially where the balance of power is so even now, and this nomination is so critical. The Democrats, both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, have said the president should nominate, and the Senate should move forward on that nomination. So it will continue to be. The Supreme Court should always be a huge issue in presidential elections. It rarely rises to that, because it's kind of abstract and hypothetical to talk about who might retire and how that would affect the balance on the court. But especially given the last few years of some of the decisions that have come down from the court, it really should always be. And I think that this vacancy will bring the court to that level that it probably should always be.
Well, speaking about it, let's talk about the impact on some upcoming decisions. 4-4 decisions would affirm the lower court ruling, as I understand it. But talk about some of the upcoming decisions that the Supreme Court will handle.
I think the biggest one, two of the biggest ones, are the abortion case out of Texas, which is one in Oklahoma has a similar situation where the Texas law basically puts new requirements on the doctors that can perform abortions, and having the hospital privileges. This has been down in the lower courts for the last few years, and the circuit, the appeals court circuit that includes Texas, has essentially approved Texas's law, which abortion rights supporters say this basically shuts down abortion clinics all over Texas, and would have the same effect in any state where that law. So if it's a 4-4 tie in that, then that becomes allowable, that states require these doctors who perform who perform abortions to have privileges at hospitals, to have the association with hospitals. Another one, biggie, is the executive orders that President Obama issued in late 2014 about who would be deported, what illegal immigrants would be deported. And that's another one where the circuit court said that the president, they basically blocked those orders from going into effect. It was basically the president deciding who, that this class of people were not going to be deported. They weren't going to enforce the immigration laws against these certain people. So that one too, it would basically, if they had a 4-4 tie, nullify the president's executive orders. Closer to home, there's 6 cases, I believe, that the court took on nonprofits, mainly universities, colleges and universities, religiously affiliated ones, on the birth control mandate. And this is kind of an extension of the Hobby Lobby birth control mandate, the contraceptive mandate case about whether employers have to cover contraceptive. And some of the cases came out of the 10th Circuit, which includes Oklahoma, includes Southern Nazarene University and some other Oklahoma colleges and universities. Well, they lost. They don't have to provide, under the law, they don't have to provide birth control as part of the insurance, but they have to submit a form to the insurance company or to the administration, HHS, saying we're not going to do it. They don't even want to do that. They feel like that makes them complicit. So in most of the circuits that these cases came from, the challengers to the mandate lost. In one, they did win. I believe that was the D.C. Circuit. So, and I think that was a Georgetown hospital, but I'm not sure. So, if they were to take that, if they were to go through with the, hear arguments, decide the case, it winds up 4-4, then those Oklahoma universities, Little Sisters of the Poor in Colorado, they lose. So those are 3 offhand. I know there are others where, there are pretty big implications for a 4-4 tie. They don't have to take them. They've already taken them. They don't have to follow through, I don't believe, now and hear the case. I think the court could probably put these off now.
We're chatting with the Oklahoman's Chris Castile via phone. He's in Washington, D.C. We're talking about the impacts of the death of U.S. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. Chris, one last question for you. The legacy of Justice Scalia, was it his intellect, his conservative rulings, or was it the snark with which he delivered some of his writings?
Probably all of those things, and some will depend on, what side of what part of the political spectrum you're on. He was a reliable conservative vote, obviously. If you're going to have a 5-4, 6-3 decision, you could guarantee that he'd be among the conservatives almost. But and that's not always. It's rare that the votes are that close. But on the big cases they are, he was never going to be a swing vote. But it was in his dissents. That's what people will always talk about. The way that his language, the way he admonished his colleagues on certain things, just some of the turns of phrase that he used, I think will always be what people, court watchers really. I don't think the average American really knows that much about what Scalia ever wrote up here. This is really kind of it's more significant in terms of his legacy, who he was, what he wrote, where he came down. It's, like I said, it's more that kind of inside the court universe that's so keen to all that. To most people, I think his legacy will be that he was always a conservative vote.
If only people of Twitter and Facebook had command of the language like Justice Scalia, it'd be a different world.
he had some doozies for sure, especially in the last few years.
Chris Castile from the Oklahoman's Washington, D.C. Bureau. As always, thank you for your time, sir. We appreciate it.
All right, Dave. Have a good one.
All right, more political coverage from Chris can be found at the Oklahoman and online at newsok.com.